She was quiet, invisible to most. But when a rich bully crossed the line, she didn't fight back. Her father did. What happened next? No one saw coming. Mia Thompson walked slowly through the gates of New Horizon High, just like she did every morning. Same faded hoodie, same worn backpack, same invisible presence. But today, something in the air felt different. It wasn't just the fog that blanketed the courtyard like a veil. It was the weight, the familiar weight of pretending not to exist. Something Mia had become an expert at. She moved like someone who had mastered the art of being unseen. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Because in a place like New Horizon, silence wasn't weakness. It was armor. New Horizon High wasn't your average public school. No graffiti on the lockers, no metal detectors at the entrance. This was the kind of place where kids didn't just carry books. They carried last names like weapons, surnames like Hawthorne, Kingsley, Devlin, names that came with beachfront properties, legal teams on retainer, and entire school wings named after their grandfathers. Here everything was about hierarchy, not the academic kind, but the social currency built on wealth, legacy, and power. It wasn't about who you were. It was about who knew your father, who wrote checks to the superintendent, who could get you suspended or saved with a phone call. Mia didn't have any of that. She lived in a modest apartment complex near the edge of the district line. Single mom, one bedroom, microwave dinners and thrift store backpacks. She wasn't poor, but in a school like New Horizon, if you weren't rich, you were invisible. Mia didn't mind. She liked being on the edge, unnoticed, untouched. While others scrambled for popularity and clout, Mia focused on her studies, her journal, and surviving high school without becoming collateral damage. She wasn't timid. She was deliberate. There's a difference. Most people assumed she had no father. No one asked. No one cared enough to wonder. And that suited Mia just fine. Because the truth, her father was very real and very powerful. His name? Jonathan Thompson. On paper, he was a successful investor, private equity, logistics, real estate. But behind closed doors, he was the kind of man you didn't cross. Not because he was violent, but because he was invisible in the most dangerous way. He didn't threaten. He didn't yell. He moved silently, like a shadow in the room. A conversation that never made it into the news. A decision made behind oak doors, late at night, by men in suits who owed him favors. He didn't need to raise his voice, because when he whispered, people listened. But Mia never used his name. Not once. She didn't need protection. She didn't want attention. Jonathan had offered it. She had declined. And so he watched her from afar, respectfully, quietly, knowing that his daughter was choosing to walk through the fire on her own terms. At school, Mia existed in a bubble of her own creation. She avoided confrontation. She didn't join clubs, didn't sit with anyone at lunch, didn't chase popularity. She moved through New Horizon like mist, present, but never quite solid enough to hold. And that worked for her until it didn't, because in every kingdom there is a queen. And at New Horizon, her name was Rebecca Kingsley. Rebecca was everything Mia was not. Loud, glamorous, dominant. She didn't walk. She arrived, with posture, poise, and the kind of confidence that only comes from a life of never hearing no. Blonde hair, tailored uniforms, high-end accessories. Every inch of her screamed power. But Rebecca didn't just have power. She curated it, controlled it, crushed with it. And like every predator at the top of the food chain, She needed something, a target. Rebecca's eyes first landed on Mia during an assembly. Mia was sitting near the back, alone as usual, taking notes, minding her business. And that was the problem, because Rebecca didn't understand not caring. She didn't understand people who didn't try to please her or fear her. Mia's indifference wasn't passive, it was defiance. Unspoken, unintentional, but defiance nonetheless. And for someone like Rebecca Kingsley, that was intolerable. She began to observe Mia, from a distance at first, studying her like an anomaly. Who was this girl who didn't dress to impress? Who didn't seek validation? Who didn't laugh at her jokes or look away when she passed? Rebecca didn't hate Mia. Not yet. First, she was curious, then intrigued, and then something more dangerous. She felt challenged. Mia had no idea she'd become a marked person. She walked through the days the same as always. Headphones in, hood up, eyes ahead. But the air was changing. Whispers trailed behind her in the hallway. Some of them laughing, some of them biting. She felt eyes lingering longer. She noticed girls at lockers quieting when she passed. She caught glances, quick, sharp, then gone. The silence around her wasn't comfortable anymore. It was dense, electric, and it had a name. Rebecca. She didn't strike fast. No, Rebecca was strategic. She believed in erosion, not explosion. And Mia? Mia had just become her next slow burn project. But here's what Rebecca didn't know. Mia had spent her whole life walking through shadows. She knew how to survive silence. She knew how to endure whispers. And more than anything, she knew how to stand tall without needing to stand loud. She wasn't looking for a fight, but that didn't mean she wouldn't finish one. This is where it begins. One girl made of noise and power. One girl made of silence and steel. And somewhere far from school grounds, a man in a tailored suit sat quietly in a corner office, reading reports, watching, waiting. Because if anyone ever dared to touch his daughter, he wouldn't speak. He would act. At first it was nothing, just a glance, a pause too long in the hallway, a subtle sneer, an accidental bump. The kind of moments most people would forget by lunch. But Mia Thompson didn't forget, not because she was sensitive, but because she'd seen it before. The prelude to cruelty, the slow boiling of something cold, and she knew the rules. In a place like New Horizon, when someone like Rebecca Kingsley looks at you that way, something's coming. It started the following week, small, almost harmless, but not quite. Mia was at her locker. The hallway buzzed with usual chatter, students rushing to class, slamming locker doors, showing off new clothes. She turned to grab her books, and there it was, a neon pink post-it, slapped across her locker door. In glittery ink it read, "Ghosts don't need lockers." No signature, no confrontation, just a message, loud in its anonymity. Mia peeled it off and threw it away. She didn't flinch, didn't look around, but inside she knew. This was not random. This was the opening move. Rebecca never got her hands dirty. She didn't need to. She had people for that. Girls who laughed when she laughed. Boys who followed her around like stray dogs. They didn't think. They obeyed. And it was one of them, most likely, that had planted the post-it. But make no mistake, the idea, that was Rebecca, because humiliation, to her, was an art. And Mia, her next canvas. The campaign escalated quickly, from post-its to whispers. In the hallway, girls passed by and shivered dramatically. "Cold in here," one said. "Must be the ghost," another added with a smirk. Mia ignored them. Every time. She didn't give them the reaction they craved. She didn't fire back. She simply existed. And that made Rebecca furious. Because for people like Rebecca, silence wasn't a defense. It was an insult. It meant you weren't afraid. It meant you didn't need to fight. And nothing threatens a bully more than someone who doesn't flinch. One day in biology, Mia sat in her usual seat, third row, window side. She had come in early, hoping for a few minutes of quiet before class. But when she opened her notebook, her heart sank. There, scribbled across the first page in permanent black ink, "Do ghosts even bleed?" She paused, closed the notebook slowly, then pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. No reaction, no complaint. But inside a fire stirred, a quiet one, controlled. She was used to this. She had survived worse, and she would not give them the satisfaction. Across the room, Rebecca watched, legs crossed, perfect posture, eyes sharp and narrowed. She didn't smile. Not this time. Because Mia's silence wasn't shrinking. It wasn't passive. It was solid. And that scared her more than any outburst ever could. So Rebecca changed tactics. Public. Louder. Because if quiet shame didn't work, maybe humiliation would. The cafeteria. Lunchtime. A place built on invisible lines, where you sat, who you sat with, what you wore while sitting. Mia always sat alone, far end, back corner. It wasn't sadness, it was choice. She liked watching, listening. It gave her clarity. But that day, clarity came at a price. Rebecca approached with her group, phones out, eyes ready, intentions sharpened. She stopped at Mia's table. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, mock sweet. Mia looked up, calm. "No." Rebecca sat, only for a second. Then she knocked over Mia's tray with a swift, deliberate flick. Food spilled onto the table, onto the floor, onto Mia. Gasps, laughter. Phones flashed. A moment turned into digital ammunition. Everyone watched. And Mia? She stood up, wiped her hands, picked up the tray, cleaned the mess, then walked away. No words, no drama, just dignity. The cafeteria was silent now, not because they pitied her, but because they didn't understand her. Why didn't she cry? Why didn't she scream? She had been humiliated in front of the entire school, and yet she walked like she had lost nothing, because she hadn't. What Mia carried was not fragile. It wasn't breakable. It was forged in silence, in shadows, in years of learning how to survive and still stand. Rebecca sat back down, suddenly unsure. She had won the moment, but somehow lost the war, because everyone saw it. They felt it. Mia hadn't cracked. She had risen, and that made her dangerous. That night, Mia said nothing to her mom. She ate dinner quietly, did her homework, went to bed early, but in her mind, the moment replayed. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something he had long suspected. She would always be a target to people like Rebecca, not because she was weak, but because she made them feel powerless. Miles away in a quiet office lit by a single lamp, Jonathan Thompson reviewed a report. It had nothing to do with stocks or markets. It was a school file. He didn't ask Mia for it. He didn't need to. He had his ways. And as he flipped through notes and observations, he saw the signs. Unusual attention, behavioral shifts, witness statements, all circling the same name, Rebecca Kingsley. He didn't get angry. He didn't call the school. He simply leaned back in his chair and waited. Because if the day ever came when Mia was truly threatened, Jonathan wouldn't speak. He would act, quietly, completely, without warning. But for now, his daughter had chosen silence. And that choice was a message to everyone watching, to everyone laughing, and especially to Rebecca. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Some moments don't need words. They don't need to shout. They don't even need to be explained. They just hit hard, deep, and without warning. This was one of those moments. It had been days since the cafeteria incident, since Rebecca Kingsley made her move, since she tried to publicly dismantle Mia Thompson. With a tray of food, a crowd of cameras, and a twisted sense of theater. But what lingered wasn't the mess. It wasn't the laughter or the post. It was Mia's silence, the way she stood, the way she looked at Rebecca, not with fear, not with anger, but with something more unsettling, unbothered dignity. And for Rebecca, that was a problem, because people like Rebecca didn't just want control, they wanted reaction, screams, tears, apologies, something. But Mia didn't give her that. She gave her silence, and silence is loud when it comes from someone who refuses to be shaken. Rebecca couldn't stand it, so she planned the next move, one that wouldn't just bruise, but humiliate, not in a private corner of the school, not in a hallway where only a few could see. This time, she wanted an audience. It was a Thursday, one of those strangely warm days in late fall, when the sun tricked you into thinking winter wasn't coming. The school was buzzing with excitement. Homecoming week was in full swing. Themes, dances, votes, pep rallies. And today's event, open mic lunch in the courtyard, a microphone, a speaker system, a brave few performing poetry, comedy, guitar covers. The rest, just enjoying the entertainment under stretched out banners and warm breezes. But someone had other plans. Mia sat in her usual spot, under the big oak tree near the edge of the courtyard. She liked the quiet, the shade, the distance. She was halfway through her sandwich when the feedback from the mic crackled. Students clapped as a boy finished a clumsy but charming cover of Ed Sheeran. Then came a voice, familiar, poised, Rebecca Kingsley. She stepped up like she was born under spotlights, hair perfect, smile rehearsed, phone in hand. "Hey everyone," she said. "Before we go back to acoustic heartbreaks, I want to read something." The crowd leaned in. A poem? A joke? No one expected what came next. Rebecca looked down at her phone. Her voice shifted, mock serious, over-enunciated. She walks like she's floating, but it's just that she's hollow, speaks to no one, dances with shadows. The crowd chuckled. Some students looked around confused. Others smirked. They knew who this was about. Rebecca continued. Her hoodie's her crown, her silence a throne. But what's a queen if she rules all alone? Laughter, now louder, crueler. Mia knew. They were laughing at her. She didn't need to hear her name, because sometimes they don't need to say your name for the dagger to land right where it's meant to. She sat frozen under the tree, sandwich untouched, fingers clenched slightly, but her face still, controlled, like a lake just before the storm. Rebecca wrapped up. So here's to the ghosts who walk among us. May they find peace, or at least a clue. Applause, whistles, phones lifted to capture the performance. Rebecca bowed, returned the mic. The show was over, or so she thought. But the silence that followed wasn't victory, it was tension. Because while Rebecca had made the crowd laugh, she had also drawn a line, and some students didn't cross it. A few tables fell quiet. A few students looked toward Mia, and what they saw wasn't shame. It wasn't defeat. It was a girl who had already made peace with their laughter, who had outgrown their games, who had been tested, mocked and pushed, and still chose not to fall apart. Mia didn't cry. She didn't storm off. She didn't throw anything. She folded up her sandwich, stood up, brushed the grass off her jeans, and walked right past the courtyard, right through the crowd, right by Rebecca, eyes forward, back straight, dignity intact. Later that day, the video went viral, at least locally. Clips of Rebecca's poem, stitched with captions, some defending, some laughing, some questioning. But one clip stood out, the one that captured Mia standing up, walking past the crowd, not flinching, and in the comments, something surprising. Support. She didn't even look at her. That's power. This ain't bullying anymore. It's obsession. Low-key respect to the quiet girl. Rebecca's trying too hard now. Not cute. Mia saw the video that night. She didn't comment, didn't share, but she felt something shift. The narrative was slipping from Rebecca's hands. Because in trying so hard to make Mia look small, she had made her look unshakable. Rebecca, on the other hand, wasn't smiling anymore. Not at the comments, not at the whispers, not at the eyes that once followed her, but now questioned her, because even the powerful have limits. And when you try too hard to destroy someone who won't fight back, you start to look like the villain. In the teacher's lounge, the faculty talked. It went too far. Someone should have stopped her. This isn't drama, it's targeted. Counselors began making quiet notes. The principal received a call from someone who didn't give his name, but made it very clear. If the school didn't address the situation, someone else would. Across town, Jonathan Thompson sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, headlines queued, background checks running. He didn't need to intervene, not yet, because Mia was still choosing silence. But if that changed, so would everything else. This was no longer just a story of bullying. It was now a story of obsession, of power unchecked, of a girl who kept refusing to break, and another girl unraveling because of it. And as for Mia, she slept soundly that night, not because it didn't hurt, but because she knew who she was. And no poem, no performance, no perfectly curated humiliation could take that away from her. Some lines should never be crossed, but when you push too hard, too far, people stop seeing lines altogether. They start seeing targets, and Mia Thompson had become one. Rebecca Kingsley wasn't losing, not in the way people fall from grace overnight. No headlines, no suspension, no public scolding. But she was slipping, and she felt it. The whispers, the tilted heads, the lack of applause, the look in people's eyes that said, she's trying too hard. Because every joke, every poem, every calculated insult aimed at Mia didn't land the way it used to. The girl who was supposed to crack hadn't, and the one doing the cracking was Rebecca. She couldn't stand it, because this wasn't just about Mia anymore. It was about Rebecca's image, her control, her throne. And Mia was messing with all of it, without saying a single word. So Rebecca did what desperate people do. She escalated. It started with a rumor. Classic, predictable, but dangerous when done right. This one wasn't about clothes or boys or attitude. This one went straight for the kill. Did you know Mia tried to hurt herself? Whispers started spreading between lockers and lunch tables. Quiet at first, then louder. I heard she wrote a note. She missed class last week. That's when it happened. The nurse said she saw something on her wrist. None of it was true, but truth wasn't required. Only repetition. And soon, teachers started looking at Mia differently, more cautiously, with pity. with concern. Mia noticed the extra glances, the pauses when she walked into the room, the counselor calling her in, asking if everything at home was okay. She knew where it came from, and this time, the silence she had used as her shield felt heavier than ever. She could have denied it, could have marched into the principal's office and demanded answers, could have confronted Rebecca directly, but she didn't, because Mia knew something about truth. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs time. Rebecca wasn't done. The rumor hadn't made Mia crumble, so she doubled down. This time she attacked what Mia valued most. It happened on a Tuesday, Mia's final period, creative writing, her favorite class. That room was her sanctuary, a place where words could stretch without judgment, where stories mattered more than status. She had been working on a personal piece, weeks of journaling, a story about pain, resilience, and identity. She never shared it, never posted it. It lived in her private Google Drive, protected, or so she thought. That afternoon, a student raised their hand. "Mr. Lorne, I think someone hacked the class blog." The teacher paused, turned to his laptop, brows furrowed. Mia watched from her desk, unsure. Then he looked at her, sharp, sad. "Mia, can I see you after class?" After the bell, she walked to his desk. He turned the screen toward her, and there it was, her story, her unpublished, deeply personal story, posted publicly, edited, twisted. The title had been changed, The Ghost Girl's Confession, the content manipulated. Lines taken out of context, turned into something dark, cryptic, almost unstable. Mia's breath caught, not because she was afraid, but because this was different. This was violation. This was intimate. She looked up, eyes sharp, voice steady. "I didn't post that." Mr. Lorne nodded slowly. "I believe you, but someone did. From your login," Mia clenched her fists. Rebecca. It had to be her. But this wasn't just cruelty anymore. This was criminal. Mia left the classroom without a word. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She burned. That night she didn't eat dinner. She sat at her desk, alone, staring at her laptop. Then she opened a blank document and wrote, "To the girl who thinks silence is weakness, you've mistaken stillness for surrender." She didn't say Rebecca's name. She didn't need to. The next morning, Mia walked into school different. Same hoodie, same backpack. But something in her posture had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was preparing. She went straight to the front office, asked to speak with the principal. Alone. What she said in that room, no one knows. But 30 minutes later, the district's IT department was involved. School devices were pulled, an investigation was opened, and Rebecca Kingsley was called out of class. She didn't panic. She smiled. "I have no idea what this is about," she told the staff, but her voice cracked. Just a little. The story spread fast. This wasn't just drama now. It was official. The edited post, the hacking, the violation. Rebecca wasn't being whispered about anymore. She was being watched. For Mia, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space, reclaiming silence, reclaiming power. And for the first time, she wasn't doing it in the shadows. 2 days later, students arrived at school to find something strange. The digital billboard at the front entrance, usually reserved for announcements, events, birthdays, was displaying a quote, white text, black background. "Silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing strong enough to survive." No name, no credit, just the message. Everyone knew where it came from and who it was for. Rebecca saw it. She stopped, stared, and for once, She didn't have anything to say. That afternoon, Mia sat under the oak tree. Same spot, same quiet. But this time, she wasn't alone. A girl from bio asked to sit next to her, then another from art class. They didn't say much, just sat, together, not out of pity, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet respect. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is endure without becoming cruel. Far from the school, Jonathan Thompson received a short email from the principal, polite, formal, explaining the situation had been handled, that the school was taking digital privacy seriously, that steps had been taken. He read it once, then deleted it. No reply needed, because he had been watching closely. And Mia, she had handled it without a name, without backup, without burning bridges. She had defended herself on her own terms. And that, to him, was far more powerful than any intervention he could have made. Rebecca was suspended, not expelled. Her father intervened, of course, but her image cracked, her friends distant, her voice not as loud anymore. And Mia, she remained steady, unmoved, not because it didn't hurt, but because she knew the storm had come and passed, and she was still standing. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it doesn't demand attention, it simply arrives, quietly, exactly when it's needed. That's how Mia Thompson fought back, not with fists, not with a viral rant, not with noise, but with silence, sharpened into strategy. Rebecca Kingsley had been suspended 3 days, a slap on the wrist dressed as accountability. Her father made a few calls. A private apology was issued. The school tried to bury the headlines. But something had changed. This wasn't about Mia versus Rebecca anymore. It had become something bigger. The school was different now. The hallways didn't echo with the same arrogance. Rebecca's entourage had thinned. Even those who once cheered her on now avoided her gaze. Because power once cracked doesn't just fade, it shatters. Mia noticed, but she didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Because this wasn't victory, not yet. This was just the shift. A week after Rebecca's return, something unusual happened. A girl named Clara approached Mia after history class. Clara had once laughed at the ghost jokes, had even shared the edited poem on her story, but now she stood awkwardly, nervous, apologetic. "Hey, I know I was part of it. I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go that far." Mia looked at her, expression calm, measured. She didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. She simply nodded. A small gesture, but powerful. Because forgiveness doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. More students came forward. Some apologized. Some just sat with her at lunch. Some messaged her quietly. "Respect for how you handled it." Mia responded to none, but she saw them. She felt the shift. The silence she once used to disappear was now making her visible. Meanwhile, Rebecca was spiraling, not in tantrums, but in desperation. Her posts, louder. Her selfies, flashier. Her comments, more cutting. She was trying to reclaim space, but the room was shrinking because people no longer feared her. They observed her. And when power is reduced to performance, it loses its grip. Then came the whisper that tipped everything over. The one Rebecca never saw coming. The rumor about her father. A faculty aide overheard a conversation, 2 school board members, whispering names, funds, campaigns. And one sentence stood out. "If this Kingsley thing gets out, it could tank his entire run." That sentence traveled fast. No one knew the details, only that something was brewing, and that somehow it connected to the Kingsley name. When Rebecca heard it, she laughed. Ignore them, she told her friends. They're jealous. But her voice shook, slightly, because deep down she knew. Her family's reputation wasn't untouchable. Not anymore. Then came the leak, a PDF file, anonymous email, sent to the school paper and to several students. Inside, invoices, donations, a pattern of special exemptions in school policy, all connected to Charles Kingsley, her father. Suddenly, the whispers became headlines. The school launched an internal investigation. Board meetings were called. Parents started showing up unannounced. Rebecca collapsed inward. She skipped class, stopped posting, barely spoke, and then she disappeared for a week. Rumors said she was pulled out. Private tutoring, therapy, a family emergency. No one knew for sure. But Mia, she knew it wasn't a coincidence, because 2 days before the leak, Mia had made a phone call, not to the school, not to the board, to her father. It was short, just one sentence. You told me silence can be a weapon. I'm ready to use it. That was all Jonathan Thompson needed to hear. He didn't ask questions. He made calls, and within 48 hours, the Kingsley name was being spoken in hushed tones for all the wrong reasons. Jonathan didn't destroy people. He dismantled systems, quietly, strategically. He didn't leak fake stories. He released the truth, the kind people bury, the kind that speaks louder than any accusation. Mia didn't watch it unfold like revenge. She watched it like survival. Because this wasn't about hurting Rebecca. It was about protecting herself in a world that had weaponized her silence for too long. By the end of the week, the power dynamic at New Horizon had collapsed. Students weren't scared to speak anymore. Teachers enforced rules equally. The principal scheduled assemblies on digital ethics and anti-bullying. But most important, people looked at Mia differently. Not like a ghost, not like a victim, but like someone who had won on her own terms. And Mia, she didn't walk any differently. She still wore that same hoodie, still sat under the oak tree, still preferred books over people. But there was something in her step now, something steady, like the ground had finally stopped moving beneath her. She didn't need attention. She didn't need applause. She had something better. Peace. And that was the quietest victory of all. Every storm has an after, not just silence, but something more fragile, more human. The moment when people stop watching and you start breathing again. Mia Thompson had survived the worst of it, but survival isn't the end. It's the beginning. The fallout from the Kingsley scandal continued to ripple through New Horizon High. The school board reshuffled leadership. 2 administrators quietly resigned. A new student protection initiative was rolled out. Teachers now underwent additional sensitivity training, and all of it had started with one quiet girl who never raised her voice. Rebecca Kingsley didn't return. Her locker was emptied, her name removed from class rosters. No official statement was ever released. She just vanished. A ghost in a school where she once ruled like royalty. And ironically, the girl they had once called Ghost was now more visible than ever. Mia walked the halls like she always did. Hood up, backpack low, no makeup, no entourage. But now, people saw her, and not in the way they used to, not as a shadow, not as a rumor, but as a person, as something steady, as someone who had stood alone and didn't fall. Her teachers spoke to her differently, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with respect. Some even asked her to speak at assemblies. to write for the school's online magazine, to mentor other students. Mia declined most offers, not out of bitterness, but because she wasn't ready. She had fought so long just to be left alone. She wasn't sure how to be celebrated, but still, she was healing. Healing for Mia looked like small things, eating lunch near others. Not with them, necessarily, just near. Letting a classmate borrow a pen, saying thanks when someone held the door. Letting her earbuds hang loose, just in case someone spoke to her. It wasn't about changing who she was. It was about opening the door, 1 inch at a time. One afternoon, she sat under the oak tree. It had been her sanctuary for so long, a place of exile, then survival. But today it felt different, lighter, like the tree wasn't shielding her anymore, but supporting her. Clara, yes, Clara, the same girl who once reposted a cruel joke, sat down beside her. No words, just presence. She offered Mia a juice box. Mia took it. That was it. But it mattered, because trust doesn't explode into life. It trickles back in, drop by drop. That weekend, Mia did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote, just for herself, not for class, not for grades, for her. The journal pages filled with thoughts she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Anger, fear, gratitude, and something else, hope. She wrote about how it felt to be invisible and how terrifying it was to be seen, about power that doesn't shout, about pain that doesn't scar the skin, but reshapes the soul. She didn't plan to share it, not yet, but the act of writing was enough, because healing often begins the moment you give your pain a name. Her mother noticed the difference too. Mia laughed at dinner, offered to do dishes without being asked, started leaving her room door open again. They didn't talk about everything that had happened, not in detail. But one night as they watched TV together, her mom reached over, squeezed her hand, and said softly, "You handled yourself with more strength than most grown women I know." Mia didn't respond. She didn't have to. The tears that welled in her eyes said enough. At school, the whispers shifted tone. They weren't rumors now. They were respect. She never even raised her voice. She didn't fight back, but somehow she still won. She's kind of a legend now, huh? She wasn't popular. She wasn't feared. She was something else, a presence. One day, Mr. Lorne, her creative writing teacher, asked to speak with her after class. "Mia," he said gently, "I think your voice deserves to be heard. Not for applause, not for attention, but because it's real." He handed her a flyer. Student Storytelling Showcase Theme, Resilience in Silence. It was optional, unrecorded, small audience, just voices, just stories. He didn't push. He let her decide. Mia kept the flyer in her pocket for 2 days, read it, reread it, nearly threw it away. Then she said yes. On the day of the showcase, the classroom was set up like a tiny theater. 20 chairs, string lights, a mic on a small wooden stand. Mia was the third speaker. She wore her hoodie, no notes. When her name was called, she stood, walked slowly to the front, and paused. There was a moment, just a beat, where the room felt too big, too bright. Her breath caught. But then she remembered. She remembered the cafeteria, the hallway stairs, the tree, the poem, the fake rumors, the post, the silence, the storm, and how she had walked through all of it and was still standing. So she spoke. "I was called a ghost once, not to my face, but loud enough that I heard it. They said I was invisible, said I didn't matter, laughed at my silence, but silence is misunderstood. It's not weakness, it's not emptiness, It's waiting. It's choosing your moment. They tried to break me, but all they did was teach me who I really was. She paused, looked around, then ended with, I don't want to be invisible anymore, but I don't need to be loud to be heard. And she sat down. The applause was soft, then stronger, then steady, not thunderous, but honest, like the moment didn't belong to her, but to everyone who had ever been quiet and finally felt seen. Later that night, as Mia walked home, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She hesitated, opened it. You didn't just survive, you changed the game. JT, she smiled, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Every story must end, but some endings are just new beginnings dressed in quiet clothing. Mia Thompson's story didn't end with applause. It didn't end with trophies. No headline called her a hero, and that's exactly how she wanted it. Because real victories, they live in the shadows, not in the spotlight. Months had passed since the storm. The Kingsley name, now a cautionary tale. Mia, still the same hoodie, still the same corner in the library, still quiet. But the silence around her had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of respect, of something that can't be faked, earned presence. Students still whispered, but now it sounded like, that's Mia. She's cool. Don't mess with her. She doesn't even have to fight back. She's that girl, the one who turned silence into strength. She didn't say much, but when she did, people listened, even the loud ones, especially the loud ones, because Mia had become a mirror, a reminder that some people don't need to shout to be heard. She walked different now, not faster, not louder, just taller, like someone who had learned that survival isn't about building walls. It's about knowing when to stand still and when to rise. Her teachers often asked her to take on leadership roles. She politely declined, except one, peer mentor program, because while she didn't want a stage, she did want to make sure other kids, the quiet ones, didn't have to walk the same path alone. Her first mentee, a freshman, soft-spoken, kept his hood up, didn't make eye contact. She saw herself. She didn't give him advice. She didn't ask him to open up. She just sat beside him every Thursday. Sometimes they talked about books. Other times, nothing at all. And slowly, he began to smile. Sometimes impact doesn't show up in numbers. It shows up in posture, in how someone walks down a hallway, in how they start to believe they deserve to be there. Mia understood that now. At home, things were better too. Her mom smiled more. They cooked dinner together, watched documentaries, laughed at dumb reality shows. The house felt lighter, not because problems disappeared, but because Mia had. For too long, she had buried herself in silence so deep, even her mom couldn't reach her. But now, she was coming back. Jonathan Thompson hadn't spoken to Mia much about what happened, not in detail, but one night he invited her to dinner, just the two of them. Private table, low lighting, soft jazz playing in the background. He raised his glass, not to toast, but to make a point. You didn't need me, he said. That scares me and makes me proud. Mia smiled, sipped her water, then looked him in the eyes. I didn't want to need you, but I always knew you were there. He nodded, didn't say another word for a while, and that silence was love. A few weeks later, Mia was walking through the front courtyard of school when she saw something new, a plaque mounted beneath the big oak tree. It read, "To those who carry quiet strength, you are not invisible, you are undeniable." No name, no dedication, But Mia knew. She touched the edge of the metal, ran her fingers across the cold engraving, and for the first time in a long time, she cried, not out of pain, but release, because silence, for the first time, didn't feel like a cage. It felt like home. Graduation came. Mia didn't give a speech, but she was named in the yearbook, most resilient, not most popular, not most likely to succeed, not best dressed, just resilient. And that felt perfect. She left New Horizon without fanfare. No farewell party, no last hurrah. Just a quiet goodbye. She shook hands with her teachers, thanked the librarian, left a note from Mr. Lorne. Thank you for seeing what others didn't. And she walked away. Not because she was running from something, but because she was walking toward herself. She didn't go viral, didn't become an activist, didn't start a podcast. She went to community college, studied creative writing, started journaling again, published a short story under a pen name. It was called The Girl Under the Oak Tree. A few hundred people read it. One of them sent her an email. I thought I was invisible. Your story made me feel seen. A reader, that was enough. Because sometimes you only need one person to listen to make every quiet word matter. Mia's life moved on. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. She worked part-time at a bookstore, adopted a senior cat, wrote in coffee shops, but every now and then, when she saw someone sitting alone, someone who looked a little too quiet, a little too small, she sat near them, not to change their world, but to remind them they weren't alone. Because if Mia's story taught us anything, it's that power isn't always loud. Strength doesn't always roar. And some of the bravest people you'll ever meet are the ones who never ask for attention, but earn your respect in silence. So now we ask you, if you were Mia, would you have fought or stood still? Would you have screamed or endured? Would you have stayed silent or let silence speak for you? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Silent Power Stories. Because here we tell stories that don't shout. We tell stories that stand still and still shake the world.